guys, welcome to this new tutorial on Kubernetes for beginners. Today we are going to talk about Kubernetes namespace. So what is Kubernetes namespace? So we already talked about the cluster. So we went in the cluster and we gave all the elements of the cluster. Now what is a Kubernetes namespace? So imagine that you have multiple applications that you want to deploy. So by best practice, you're not going to take all those applications and put in one namespace, right? So what is a namespace? A namespace is just a room, right? A namespace is just a subcluster that you can use. So you can divide your cluster into a subcluster, for example. So if I have, for example, let's say this application that you guys see here, instead of taking all the application and put in one namespace, I'm going to divide them into multiple namespaces so that it's going to be easy to actually go ahead and manage them, right? That's why it's called Kubernetes namespace. Kubernetes namespace is just a room in the Kubernetes cluster where you can use to deploy applications separately. So by best practice, if two applications have no business together, you are not going to deploy them under the same namespace, for example. So we're going to practice that. That's how you create a namespace, for example. Sorry, I have cough. That's how you create a namespace, for example, using the YAML file. So just imagine, right? A namespace is just like a virtual cluster. So people will be like, okay, a namespace is a virtual cluster, right? It's just like a cluster in a cluster. Imagine that you have your room. In your room, you have your house, right? Your house is like a cluster, but in your house you have multiple rooms, and every single room serves for a single purposes, right? For example, the traditional house in the US, you're going to have the guest room, the master room, the kitchen, the living room, the dining rooms. All those rooms are actually separate from each other and they serve a specific purpose. So for our applications, we are going to separate. When we are using we have multiple applications, we separate them into multiple rooms so that it can actually be managed easily. So we will demonstrate that we actually demonstrated in the cluster, right? Now think of a namespace like a virtual room in the building, right? This is a scenario. We think of a namespace like a virtual room in the building. Now, virtual room, just like a building, can have multiple rooms. A community cluster can have multiple namespace, right? So think of that like a virtual room in the building, and just like the building can have multiple rooms, community can have multiple namespace as well. And another scenario, like each room provides a separate space for individual or team to work without interference with other. Similarly, Kubernetes provide the isolation and separation of resources on different team and projects. So that's what I was saying. Like we can isolate application in different rooms so that they don't have to talk together. If I have multiple applications that I'm deploying, for example, like Dallas, Austin, Lubbock, Washington, Detroit application, and they have nothing to do together, I will isolate them. The only way to isolate them is to put them actually in the separate room. Imagine that, for example, you can go to a big hotel, and in that hotel you have multiple rooms, right? Every single customer is on his own room, isolated, so they don't have relationship. So and they're gonna be on different floor. They're gonna be on different. Room, and also each room can have its own furniture and decoration, tailored to the preference of its occupant. Similarly, Kubernetes namespace allow for customization for customized resources, allocation, and management based on the specific requirement of each project. Right? You isolate them and you manage them. When you go to the hotel, you rent your room, you do whatever you want in that room, and that will not affect your neighbor that is on a different room, or that will not affect your neighbor that is on a different floor, right? It's in summary, namespace in Kubernetes provide a way to organize, isolate, and manage resources with a cluster. They enable multi-tenancy resources management, access control, and environment segregation, making it easier to manage complex application and environment in Kubernetes cluster. So let's go to actually to the cluster and actually try to understand this in depth. Now, I have my cluster here. There's a tool that I will advise you to install. It's called kubectx. When you install that tool, you can actually use that tool to basically lock yourself into a room. It's called kubectx. And when you install that, you will use the command kubectx for that. Now, imagine if I type, let me increase the size of this to make it easy. K stands for kubectl. As you guys can see here, I already set an alias here, right? So we say kubectl get ns. Ns stands for namespace. You can type kubectl get ns or kubectl get namespace. So kubectl get ns. If I type this, I'm going to see all the namespace that we have here. I'm going to see all the namespace that we have here. But by default, there are some namespace that automatically come with Kubernetes, right? By default, Kubernetes comes with some namespace. For example, let me grab Kube. I will show you all the namespace that come with by default. So let's grab Kube. So by default, this namespace, this tree here, I wanted to grab Kube so that filter. By default, these namespace come with Kubernetes. So those are the namespaces that Kubernetes use, right? It's come by default. You don't have to create it, but anyone else need to be created. Like all these namespaces that you see here, they have been created. All these namespaces here, they have been created, for example. Now, this is what I'm going to do. Now, let's create few namespaces. So I showed you guys earlier all the namespace. So let's create few namespaces. Let's imagine that I want to deploy a couple of applications. I want to deploy an application called Dallas. I want to deploy another one called Houston. I want to deploy another one called Austin. I want to deploy another one called Detroit. And I want to deploy another one called Washington. So let's take on those 6 applications. Now, because Dallas application, Houston application, Austin application, Detroit application, and Washington application have nothing to do together, I'm not going to put them on each namespace, on a single namespace. I will not put them on a single namespace, but instead, I will actually manage to put them in multiple namespaces. So I'm going to put each of them in their namespace. Now I can create a namespace for this application, for example. So I can pass here, I can say, for example, kubectl create namespace. If I type this in my cluster, it's going to create all these namespaces. So if I say kubectl create namespace, so it has created all these namespaces, as you guys can see. Now, I'm going to go ahead and actually create an application, create an application on each namespace here, all right? I will go ahead and create an application on each namespace here. So so that I'm going to use something called hem, right? I will use something called hem. So I will say hem create, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create this. Then after I will apply that. So I can say hem create. It's going to create this. So let me create this to try. So let's say hem create. Hem create will actually create all this. Now, if I say ls, you will see that these are the chart that have been created, right? Now, I can install this chart. So instead of saying hem create, I can say, for example, instead of saying hem create, I can say, for example, hem, you know, hem install. So it's going to be hem install, right? So I will say hem install. Let's remove this. I will say hem install this. So I will say hem install this. I'm just specifying the name of the application, the name of the chart. Crap. Good. So I have that created. Then I'm going to say to specify the namespace where I want this one to be created. I put it there. But let's just do this. So first thing, I want to create this. So I will say Kubernetes. The first one that I want to create, let me put this side by side. Make it easy. So I will say hem create. We'll not use Kubernetes this time around. I will say hem create $, $-n, right? I'm just specifying the namespace, right? I'm just specifying the namespace. It's going to create that applications, right? It's going to create an application. If I say kubectl get port, you're not going to see anything. Why are you not seeing anything? Because I am not in that namespace, right? You're not seeing anything because I am not in that namespace. So I created one. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass here to create all of them in one shot. So I will pass -n host on here. Or actually have host on multiple times. So let's change this one by for Austin. Gonna be Austin. -m just means that you are specifying the namespace, right? -n stand for specifying the namespace that you want this to be deployed. I will take this, I will run on this, it will create those applications one after another. Now, if I say, for example, I don't care about long command no more, I just care about the name of the namespace, which we all know by now. Now, if I say kubectl get port, I will not see anything. That's $, right? So $, get deployed here. Now, if I say kubectl get port -n $, I am in the $ namespace here, actually, right? So let me go back to default. Change my namespace to default. So if I say kubectl get port, I will not see $, get deployed in that. But that's not the application I'm talking about now. If I say kubectl get port -n $, you will see that the $ port is there. If I want to see the Houston port, I will say -n Houston. You will see that the Houston is there. If I change this to -n Austin, you will see that the Austin port is there, or -n Washington, you will see that the Washington is there. So I was able to deploy this application in multiple namespace, right? So if I say kubectl get port, you will only see the $ port, right? You will only see the $ port here. So I can even say hem delete $, for example. So I want to kill that. So if I say now kubectl get port, you will not see anything. Now if I say kubectl get port -n $, you will see that port in the $, namespace. But actually, when I say kubectl get port, we don't see any ports. Why? Because those ports were deployed on separate namespace. So as you guys can see, I've deployed a separate namespace. If I say kubectl get namespace, you will see the $. You will see this is the $ namespace here. Probably the Washington namespace is just here at the end, and the Houston namespace should be somewhere probably in the middle, right? So that's how we use namespace. So Kubernetes namespace is just the way to separate your cluster, divide your cluster into multiple rooms so that you can actually deploy applications and you can isolate those applications from one another. I hope you like this video. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and also please share. See you guys in the next video. Thank you.